Hi witches! So we are back in our normal place. The construction people are now over there, so hopefully we can hang out here for a little bit. Today is, of course, 420. Happy 420. A high holy day indeed. Ha ha ha. Now last year I spoke a little bit about cannabis in terms of like herbalism. But today specifically, I wanted to take some time to talk about canna-witchcraft and working with cannabis in your personal magical practice, which is not something I hear people talk a lot about, but it's something that I kind of have a little bit of experience in that I wanted to talk about. So that's what we're doing today. Now, I am going to preface this entire video with the fact that I am in no way encouraging you to break the law in order to practice witchcraft. Safety first is always my motto, so please, please do not put yourself into any danger. But if you're like me and have legal access to this herb, I think that there is a lot to be said about using it in your practice. So a really great resource for this, if you would like any further reading, I've linked this down below, this article. But Paige Vanderbeck, who is the author of Green Witchcraft, A Practical Guide to Discovering the Magic of Plants, Herbs, Crystals, and Beyond, which is a mouthful, but again, have it down below. She has a lovely podcast about this as well as an article where I got a ton of really great information. Not all of my information, obviously, but a lot of really great information. So if you like this video, if you want to learn a little bit more, she has like an in-depth podcast about it. And it's really cool to hear her perspective of things. So let's just jump in. Now, human beings have been using plant medicine in many forms in order to alter their states of consciousness, in order to gain a greater view of the universe, or perhaps a deeper understanding of the world around them for millennia, right? One of the oldest and most notable examples of this is actually the oracle at Delphi, who was said to kind of take on the spirit of Apollo in order to dispense advice. Now this went on for centuries, so there were different oracles, of course, but regardless, the high priestess would sit over this kind of vent on a three-legged stool, this vent, and all of these vapors would arise about her. And if you look at artistic illustrations of this, it is very mystical, very witchy for sure. But it is now thought, like with science and stuff, it's kind of realized that natural gases were coming up and probably giving her these like visions or maybe altering her consciousness that way. But I still think it's really neat that we have this kind of example going back, you know, thousands and thousands of years of human beings finding ways to kind of open themselves up to the divine through ingesting or inhaling things. So moving forward in history just a little bit, it is said that early Christians believed that the oil that Jesus used to baptize people actually contained cannabis oil. So it's kind of, again, used to kind of bring people into the light of God, perhaps, or however you choose to interpret that. But it is seen as kind of a sacred herb. We just don't talk about it in the church because in the Middle Ages, actually, the Pope outlawed cannabis. Now, as we know, humans are pretty crafty people. Some would say witchcrafty even, maybe, ha ha ha. But they used other herbs to kind of stimulate the same effect that cannabis oil would have on them. So herbs such as belladonna, henbane, datura, or mandrake on themselves externally. Some people theorize that they actually rubbed these onto broomsticks and inserted them vaginally. And this is kind of where we get that idea of like the flying ointment, or that kind of symbol of the witch flying their broomsticks. It was believed that these people kind of engaged with these herbs or used these herbs in order to loosen their spirits from their physical form and kind of go cavort throughout the night, usually with the devil. It was thought that witches would leave their bodies once a month in order to kind of meet with the devil himself, have, rituals, make pacts, even have orgies and stuff like that. But yeah, if you're interested in learning about flying ointments, they are very interesting, very historical, and I recommend you starting your research. Now, moving right along, let's talk about some of the correspondences for this plant and how modern witches can use it in their practice. Now, if you really want to put cannabis oil on a broomstick and insert it wherever you so choose, I guess feel free, but if you're more interested in learning about how we can use this herb in modern witchcraft, I'm going to talk about some correspondences and some methods. So these correspondences do come from Paige Vanderbeck. She notes that the planets associated with cannabis are Saturn, Venus, and Jupiter. The zodiac signs are Capricorn and Gemini. The elements are earth and water, which are my two favorite elements, to be honest with you. I'm an earth sign and also have a lot of water in I have like a lot of Scorpio in general in my chart, which duh. But those are my two favorite elements to work with. The deities that this herb is really associated with include Ra, Pan, Dionysus, Osiris, Shiva, Isis, Bast, Hestia, Venus, and Freya. So I work with Bast. Now, I do work with Bast, and I have actually as an offering for her a CBD salve that I got. So it's like not quite cannabis, but it's like adjacent, if that makes sense. Well, it is. It's just not THC. Anyways, you know what I meant. You know what I meant. Finally, magically, this herb is used for manifestation, healing, abundance and wealth, clearing negative energy, love and sex, protection, sleep, communication with spirits, cursing and binding, as well as meditation, which I think a lot of these are very evident. So yeah, I think those correspondences, like when I think about the herb and the way that I have personally used this in my practice, I think those definitely go hand in hand in the ways that I've experienced using this herb. In terms of those correspondences and my own personal workings with this herb, I definitely see a correlation. I use it more for like kind of the dream and spirit communication aspect of things, being a hedge witch, but definitely in terms of the elements that it's associated with and the correspondences listed, I would say yes, it's really cool to have things independently verified by other witches as well, so I was really happy about that. But let's talk about some ways that you can apply this herb. Now, I don't mean like physical application, I mean like in your practice. So again, before I go forward, I do want to just mention that I have legal access to this herb. And again, I don't want anyone just like going out and doing anything illegal. All of those things that I talked about, all those correspondences, there are other herbs that you can get that correspond with those items as well. So like you do not need to feel like, don't feel pressured to go out and like try to find cannabis places. Like please be safe. Okay, so the number one way that I use this in my personal practice is to open up to the divine and to open up to the universe. So often I will use it to quiet my mind. I use this a lot to kind of get into the ritual headspace or the headspace to read tarot cards, just so my focus is solely on the thing in front of me. I struggle with a lot of anxiety, so my brain is always going like a million miles a minute. Like literally right now, I am contemplating what I need to make, like put on my grocery list, like as I am literally talking. Like there's so many things, right? But when I do ingest cannabis, I usually vape it, so if you're someone who maybe is struggling to connect or struggling to quiet their mind during a meditation, maybe having a little bit of cannabis prior to meditation, it might help. I find that when it helps me the best when I'm doing a guided meditation because my visualization is just so much more intense. I can really see all of the images in my mind's eye, and I have a deeper and more like visceral experience whenever I meditate after using cannabis. Now, along those lines, in terms of using cannabis in conjunction with your spell work, you might want to, like if you have flower, you might want to like mix in other herbs that correspond with whatever intention that you are setting or whatever the intention behind your spell work is. I do want to follow up with that by saying be sure that the herbs that you're getting are food grade and not just like from some random metaphysical store. Just like ask, because not all herbs are treated the same way, and it's always best if you are ingesting something to get food grade herbs. So it is possible. You can go to like a health food store. They often have bulk herbs there, just in my experience, but just please be safe and always like put yourself first, like safety first as always. Now, cannabis can also be used as an offering. One of the deities that was listed in conjunction with cannabis is actually Bast, and she's a deity that I work with. I did know this prior to reading the article from Paige, but that was, again, cool to like kind of verify that for myself, because she is kind of the deity I work with when I am doing most of my like self-care workings or practices, and cannabis plays a very big part of that. So I do offer I have a like CBD salve that I gave to her. She's kind of known, one of her epithets is the Lady of the Ointment Jar, which is why I picked that. But yes, her energy is very calming. The cannabis that I purchase is very calming. I'm an indica heavy person. So it just really heightens the experience of relaxation with her for me, if that makes sense. And it helps me, it strengthens my workings with her. Other ways you might want to consider connecting with this herb is by choosing specific strains to match your intentions. Now I know that the names are generally pretty funny. Like I sometimes like will go to the dispensary and just be like, oh, that one sounds weird, I'm gonna try that. But generally speaking, indicas or like kind of indica heavy cannabis strains, indicas or indica heavy strains are generally good for rest, sleep, and kind of a full body experience. So you feel more like of a physical sensation, maybe of heaviness. That's generally what I feel. I just like, as soon as I smoke, I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so good. And then on the other side of things, you have your sativas or sativa heavy strains that are all about activity productivity, creativity, and kind of give you more of that head high. So like kind of that mental, you might be thinking a lot, you might have a lot of ideas. So that is really great and very stimulating, right? So I like to use indicas specifically. I use those a lot more in my practice anyways, but like very much so in the waning part of the lunar cycle, and the sativas in the waxing part, because it kind of matches their energy. Yeah, I know, fun things, corresponding things, yay. Something else you might want to consider is actually getting a specific bowl or a specific piece that you use for your practice only. So you're not like hanging out with your friends in the living room using this like bowl or whatever. It's specifically for your practice. So not only do you get to treat yourself a little bit, but it makes it just that much more special. You might find some that have really beautiful imagery. I found one that had like all these really cool leaves on it, and I should have bought it. But my friend actually for my birthday, like a couple years ago, like hand carved me like a pipe basically, with like a little screen in it, and he put like runes and shit on it. It was so cool, and I still have it. I love it. It's one of my like treasured tools. You could also kind of bless or consecrate this tool for your use in witchcraft as well. So that's kind of another avenue of doing spell work if that's what you so choose. But I think that having a specific piece set aside just for witchcraft is a really good idea, because it makes that act that much more special, if that makes sense. Now, if you prefer to ingest cannabis in like a joint or a blunt versus a glass piece, like a bowl or whatever you might be using, consider writing either your intentions or some sigils on your paper in like a food safe marker. So that way, as you smoke your cannabis, you're also ingesting part of that intention and putting it out into the world every time you exhale. I actually really like doing this. I think it's really fun. This is also a really good time to experiment with different herbal and smoking blends if you prefer having flower. I tend to vape things just because it's like simple and I don't have to think about it. I can just like hit my pen and then be happy. But for some of those more intense rituals, I do actually really like having papers and flowers. So as I'm like doing the motion, great. YouTube, please don't cancel me. I'm just talking about things educationally, I promise. Now, if you're a lunar witch like me and also a canna-witch like me, let me give you a pro tip if you don't know it already, but put some moon water in your bong. Trust me, just like trust me. No, but actually, like if I am smoking on the full moon, I will go and charge like some moon water and put it into my piece and use that, because I find that it just like really, especially if I'm setting an intention with that act, just really helps my whole night go swimmingly. So just a thought. Alternatively, if you have super gross bong water, you can use that to make war water or perhaps in a hex. If you're a witch who's looking to make black salt, you can use your ashes from, you know, however you're smoking flour, I guess, in order to, you can mix that in with your salt in order to make black salt. So you aren't throwing anything away, it doesn't go to waste. It might smell a little bit weird, I guess, so maybe adding some essential oils to kind of cover that up. But I actually do use like ash in, like cannabis ash in my black salt. It is good for protection, just saying. I've seen some witches who get like really into it and are actively working with the plant spirit of cannabis, which is very cool. I'm not quite there yet in terms of my personal practice, but they've actually set up altars for their various tools, as well as like they have like their little stash jar and like their pipe or whatever, their bowl and like their papers, and they have some crystals and stuff around it. Super cool. Be creative. I think that is an amazing idea. I wish I had more stuff in order to do that. I just feel like I don't have pretty stuff yet. So, but like I said, I do have like that pipe that my friend made me. He like carved it out of wood. It was so crazy. But I do have that actually on an altar. So I try to keep it in kind of an exalted place, but it is definitely part of my practice. I just wish I had more things in order to make it more prominent. So maybe I'll be investing in that soon. The final thing I wanted to talk about today is kind of that communal aspect of cannabis. I think that like, especially if you're in a area in which this herb is completely like legal recreationally, connecting with either your coven mates, maybe some witch friends over like a shared blessed joint around a bonfire, that just sounds like the most fun to me. Definitely feel like using this herb in kind of a group setting would heighten the experience of whatever spell work you would be doing, not only because of the aspects of the herb itself, but because like group rituals already do that. So both of these things already kind of like heighten the experience for me, at least. So like by combining them, it's just like, oh my gosh, so amazing. So those are just some ideas that I had. Again, all of the resources in that podcast, or the podcast and the blog post will be linked down below. please go check out Paige. She's awesome. She does not need me to be shouting her out, but I like her as a resource. And without further ado, I hope you guys have a fabulous 420. Please stay safe if you are indulging in anything. And I'll see you guys on Friday.